Hello, everyone. Welcome to our little conversation here titled Aspects of Self-Reflection. As Aida said in the intro, it's going to be a talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of self-reflection. And my name is Christian Schwanz, or AKA C. I work for Ableton. I've been making music for the last 2 decades, and I have here with me the amazing Born in Flames, based in Berlin, a producer, performer, and DJ. Sarah Farina, also based in Berlin, a DJ and a producer. And Similar Objects, my good friend from based in Manila, also a DJ and producer, and also a community leader, co-founder of Club Matryoshka. So yeah, very excited to have you all here. And we had some initial conversations before this talk, which brought me to the topic of tonight's talk, self-reflection. It is a process. It helps us to understand who we are, what motivates us, and how our behavior, I guess, affects us and those around us. Self-reflection, in my opinion, can lead to motivational, quite controversial concepts of self-criticism and higher self-esteem, which makes us more competitive. It leads us to the assumption that in order to succeed in life, or put it into our context here, in order to succeed as a music maker, we need to put us above average, so to say, and we need to be special. And I believe there's a danger here, and I would be thrilled to hear whether you think the same. So I'm gonna maybe pass it first to Hoher in Manila, and just wonder what you think about what I just mentioned.
Mm, yeah, I was going over the sort of guide questions earlier, and I was thinking about the whole concept of self-reflection, and it's something I think we do a lot as artists. We always think about, are we doing enough? Are we creating enough? Are we achieving enough? And a lot of these things sometimes can be paralyzing as well. At times, it's like it drives us, it's a fuel, but sometimes it also feels like we're burning ourselves out as well. We feel like when we're not creating something, at least personally, sometimes I feel like when I'm not doing something, I'm not creating or doing something artistic, I feel like I'm a waste of space. And this sort of gets me down a bit. So yeah, that's sort of what I feel sometimes when I reflect on myself and think about my meaning and my purpose. Yeah.
Was 2020 like a year of more reflections, or has it always been the same for you?
I feel like 2020 sort of forced me into more introspective moments since I'm locked up a lot here in Manila. I'm locked up at home a lot. It's not so easy to go out, so I'm usually just at home, locked in my thoughts. More time for reflection, actually. So I feel like there's a lot that has been going down, like mentally as well, and yeah, just it just sort of like you're just like locked up with your thoughts a lot more now. Yeah.
Sarah, would you like to share some thoughts on my intro argument here?
hmm Yes, sure. Thanks for having me. You mentioned competitiveness, right? And yeah, that's something we can see everywhere. And it kind of makes me sad because when I think about music and why I love music so much and the dance floor, I have to think about togetherness and collectivity. And that somehow gets lost with the capitalistic system we're living in. And so I believe that we need to fight for spaces and create spaces where we can create some kind of utopia, where we can practice an alternative. And in terms of last year, COVID forced us all into some kind of reflection, hopefully. And I just realized that I can only speak for myself, but I believe I'm over self-reflecting most of the time, which in itself is maybe not that bad, but then the criticism comes as well. And I'm definitely doing that too much. And I believe there's like this whole hype of being mindful all the time and working on yourself. And I think it's important to realize that feeling emotions and reflecting them all the time can also worsen things, you know. And because it's not always safe to go really inward and try to find out everything about yourself, like why you're feeling a certain way. And I believe it depends on, like, if you're in a certain environment where you have the tools to deal with certain things that maybe trigger you, for example. And so in saying that, I believe, and like when we talk about self-reflecting, it's what helped me at least is realizing that not every emotion makes sense all the time, and it doesn't have to.
So to say, emotions come and we should let them go, I guess.
Yeah, it's information, and we can it's like a long process or ongoing forever to learn emotion or perceiving emotion as information, and then learn tools how we want to cope with them, or if we want to cope with them all the time.
So if we see self-reflection again as this concept of self-esteem, James, how can it be healthy if most music makers therefore need to be above average? What's your thought on that?
First of all, thanks for having me. Second of all, I have a problem with, I guess, the word average. I guess I get the idea of competition that you're talking about, because I feel like the world that we live in makes us think about visibility the whole time. And you also see like how everybody else creates visibility. And I think from this, it's very easy to become envious, and to also, you know, like maybe have this idea of like, I have to stick out. How do I make myself visible? And that's, I think it's super, super tricky to not fall into the trap of being like, why does this other person get so much light when what I'm doing is maybe as good, or why is nobody looking when I'm doing this thing that's like so amazing? And it's very, I think it's very tricky to understand that the light that shines on other people is not taken away from you, and to kind of, you know, like understand that yeah, there was this meme once, I think, which said it's not pie. You know, when you take something away, it's not like the slice is gone or something, but like there's room for all of us. And I think it's like there's so many moments of, I guess, self-criticism and also being self-conscious. I believe that a lot of musicians that I meet tend to be super self-critical and super self-conscious. And that's generalizing, obviously. It's not true for everybody. But I think it's very, very dangerous to, you know, like when you have a tendency to be critical about yourself or self-conscious a lot, and you overthink things, and then something like a pandemic hits and you have even more time to overthink things. There's definitely a trap of, you know, like falling into this weird spiral of envy and comparing yourself to others and being like, hey, my light, their light, you know. Yeah, it's something that you have to, I guess, reflect on. And like Sarah said, it's an emotion and you see it and it's coming, and probably everybody has it, you know. Envy is something very human, and then you can be like, yeah, I have this thing and it bothers me and I'm not going to let it out. Or maybe I'm going to let it out and then I'm going to be like, fuck. But it's like superhuman to do that, you know. We compare ourselves to others, and I think what Sarah says is true. It's like the capitalist system that's kind of behind this, because everything is about, you know, like comparing yourself to others, and, you know, like turning yourself into a product. And social media really help with turning yourself into a product, and, you know, being good at things, or like adding skills to being a musician that you didn't ever have to have before, you know, like create visibility for yourself or something like that. So challenges everywhere.
So this trap, like self-esteem or self-perception, can bring. Do you think it's very much a trap which is connected to gender as well? Like, is it harder for women, for example, to face sort of self-perception and James, what do you
Should I?
think? Or
Or
Sarah?
sorry.
Yeah.
I believe that everything in terms of identity plays a role, like skin color, passport, class, religion, everything. And there's nothing is not political. So everything is political. And we grow up with certain expectations, or in a society that has certain expectations, if they see you as a certain type of person and so on. And that's definitely a part. Being not white, there are certain things that come with it. And then there are also intersection of identity, because I believe that not everyone has the same struggle. It's important to know, for example, I don't know, a rich Black person might have a different access as a middle-class Black person, for example. And I feel we all have the responsibility to check in with ourselves to know where we are on the spectrum and like what privileges we have and where we are oppressed in our identities, and to look within and see where's the part of power that I have to be part of the solution. Because adding to what James was saying, regarding being jealous of other people and so on, I believe that it's important for people who have, for example, more privilege in terms of platform and following, that I wish for those people, for example, to lift others up, to use their power for good, for example, and to be part of the solution. Because when speaking of mindfulness, there's also this kind of trap of like, you have it in your hands and you just have to work really hard and then you'll get it. But that's just not how life works. Life is very unfair. And a lot of things that we don't have is not in our control. It always makes me think of Kanye West's thing where he said that slavery was a choice, for example, you know. It's like a hardcore statement. And in this like mindfulness, wellness world, there are a lot of these toxic positivity people or law of attraction and all these kind of things, where they kind of like say, you have the power to change everything. That might be true to some extent for some people, and I'm happy for people if it works for them. I wish it would work for me if I go to a healing person and, I don't know, drink ayahuasca and do this or that, and then my life is suddenly amazing. But things are more complex, and yeah, I just wish for more responsibility and accountability.
Well, right now I feel I have this responsibility to actually do share that sort of, I don't know, self-compassion and mindfulness, how it helped me last year. Like from March onwards, it was like quite tough, like figuring out how I would like manage moving across continents in a pandemic. And I started to really meditate, not just a bit, but like daily. And I've spent thousands of minutes in silence. And it's not like, yay, I made it, but it like obviously brought me, like, I can just talk about my own life, just a lot of healthy solutions. So that's why I was quite fascinated with when I was sort of working on this talk topic, that there is this scientist, Christine Neve, who actually looked sort of into what happens in our brains, you know, like when sort of in order to motivate ourselves, we choose sort of self-compassion, which just like is based on the idea that we should see ourselves like we see a best friend. And what I found really amazing is that it actually sort of, just by sort of applying self-compassion, it literally changes the chemicals in my brain. So whereas self-esteem, as I called it earlier, like sort of this bit old-fashioned way of motivating us, actually like puts sort of bad chemicals in our brain, and there's no way to stay motivated. Self-compassion does the opposite and just sort of, yay, makes it all good. And I think it's not the solution for everything, but it's something which is just there. Like not your whole life will change, but something is there which will never go away. Which again, like James said, it's not like a pie. There's endless amounts of sort of love and self-compassion. But yeah, I understand. It still doesn't make things just extremely easy. I wonder how all of you thought in the very beginning when I wanted to figure out the topic for today. To me, all these words kind of sounded the same: self-reflection, self-esteem, self-criticism. In German, it's quite common to say Selbstkritik, self-criticism. And only later I found that they're also very different. Is that would you do you have the same feeling? I'm just going to pass it to Hoher. Like
Hmm.
when I tell you first, hey, I'm going to invite you to a talk, it's going to be about self-esteem, you probably would have been quite excited also. You wouldn't have thought like, oh, there could be do these words all sound the same to you, or were you quite aware that it's like very
Well,
different concepts for each thing?
when you first approached me, they all sounded the same. So I only started like looking into it when you sent me the document. It does make sense, like the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion, and sort of like approaching it from a kinder sort of point of view. It's like sometimes self-esteem can be sort of tough, um, especially like when we're sort of basing it on all of these external gauges of success and stuff. Like what everyone said earlier, the sort of world now sort of puts us against each other in this sort of like culture of attention. And you suddenly feel like, oh, you're not meeting those certain sort of standards. You suddenly feel like maybe my art's not great. But sort of like looking at it from a sort of self-compassion sort of perspective, you start to think about um sort of reflecting on yourself with a sort of just sort of generally like kinder, being kinder to yourself in terms of not being too rough on yourself if you don't sort of get the same numbers, same number of listeners. I mean, as musicians, they sort of like these sort of buzzwords are always like being thrown at us, like, oh, what are your analytics when people sort of approach you, or how many followers do you have? It's like these are things that we never really had to think about before. Like we just wake up, make music, express yourself, sit in front of your instruments and play. Now it's like you play and then people ask, well, how many numbers did you get on this song? So thanks for putting me on to the difference between like the two, and sort of all of these sort of other layers to like self reflection, like how you're saying that you can sort of like change the chemicals in your brain. I've done a lot of reading before in terms of meditation, and a lot of it sort of says that you can sort of like hardwire your brain certain ways. And you mentioned last year that you got really heavy into meditation again, and I have this sort of like on and off relationship with it. Like in 2012, I was super super into it. I think I was one of those toxic positivity guys in 2012. Till life sort of hit me, and sort of like you realized it has to be you actually have to do something and not just sort of like believe in like positivity. You have to like have some sort of form of action, like which Sarah was saying. It doesn't solve everything, but I feel like it has helped me every time I meditate. It sort of brings me into a place of where I can sort of feel more in control of my emotions and my reactions and responses. And I feel like it's sort of there's a huge difference. Sometimes I'm like suddenly just bursting out into tears and like, like saying random shit on the internet, like or falling into this trap of self-hate. Then I take myself away from the computer or from social media for a few minutes of silence. I come back and I just start laughing at myself. It's like, what was that? So
Mm.
for me, I really like using meditation to sort of center and ground myself, or to sort of like bring myself back to sort of this sort of zone or sort of level where you can sort of operate optimal in an optimal level and understand things sort of from a grounded perspective. Then you start moving. I feel like it's how we interface with the whole world. So if we're in control of that, it's very powerful. Versus like when I wasn't into meditation, it's like my brain's just spiraling and like shooting into different directions and entertaining so many thoughts, good and bad. So yeah, I feel like yeah, just sharing.
No, thank you so much. James, was sort of the difference between all these aspects, which in my eyes sort of maybe like self-reflection might be the umbrella, and then there's self-esteem, self-compassion, self-care. Was it also like to you that it kind of like sounded all the same first, or? And second question would be, how do you stay motivated?
They don't sound the same to me, and I'm also quite critical of some of these aspects that you just mentioned, because I have the feeling that to me, being kind to others is something that is like integral to my understanding of how I want to approach the world. And this always comes first for me so much that I don't have the connection to like I have to be kind to myself so I can be kind to others, which might be there, but I also think that a lot of these ideas, like mindfulness and being kind to yourself, etc., I think it stems from a position of privilege very often. And I think having even just like having the time to spend so much time on working on yourself, it has these. There's like also, like self-optimization is kind of like in there, and that's also a bit of a dangerous word for me. And so yeah, I don't know. I think there's a huge point in what Sarah said earlier. Also, like toxic positivity, etc., etc. Of course, it's good to reflect yourself and take the time to work on yourself when you have issues and when you realize, especially when, I don't know, the conditions in the world change and there's so much that you have to process, and it's really, really hard to process all these bad news that we get all the time, like people being killed in the streets for the color of their skin, climate change, issues of gender, etc., 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 or like totalitarian regimes and all these things that we like perceive every day, and then they can be very hard on us and weigh on us. And obviously it's good to like take a moment for yourself and try to like be kind to yourself, I guess, and take a step back. And but I also think that it's really, really important to not always center yourself so much. I think it's important to not like have this narcissistic idea of like I have to work on myself. I feel like there's a moment of that in there. It's like working on myself gives me this, it's for a certain benefit, and as Sarah said in the beginning, she said something like, I just wish we would all work on like making things better for everybody. And I think that's something that I would like to concentrate on, or not concentrate on, but that's something that I think is like very central to what we're all also doing as like fringe musicians. I feel like we're on this bubble that has like a political understanding of the world, and like tries to inform themselves, etc., etc. And it can be all overwhelming, and of course you have to process it. But I don't know. That was very. I guess there were lots of ideas on what I just said. Maybe somebody else wants to pick up on them.
I still want to know what motivates you. Sorry.
Speaking to James, right?
James, I still wanted to know what motivates.
What motivates me to make music, or what motivates me to stay alive?
I think it's all connected. Your life and your music.
I don't know. I feel like I was just in the editing room working on a concert that of mine that we filmed last week, and the editor was a fellow musician, and we talked about passion and how you like get to how you start, or how we started making music. And I think it's just always been there for me, and it's a mode of expression for something that just comes out of me, whether I'm singing in the street and like recording something into my phone, or whether I sit at home and I'm like, oh, I have pianos, or like whatever, grab a stick and like drum on something. It doesn't even have to be, you know, like making music, but I think it's a mode of expression for me that I can't think myself without. So I don't really have a motivating factor, but I just have to do it. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Sarah, you were saying something.
Yeah, I wanted to add something regarding when we are looking inward, basically, and what has helped me is because of a lot of times the positive affirmation things don't really work for me, like looking into the mirror and like, I can do this, I'm amazing. It just doesn't work for me. It feels like a lie even, or like for some people or for me, it can feel like counterproductive. And it reminds me of the concept of body positivity that a lot of people also criticize. And just as an example, it helps maybe to move from being hateful towards yourself or something through the spectrum into the direction of being more neutral. Like, let's say you don't have to love yourself all the time. It doesn't even work. But like, I'm okay with myself, you know, like tiny steps, and every day it will change. So this is something that has helped me, and just like knowing that it's okay not to believe in peace and positivity all the time, and just asking yourself questions like, what feels possible for me right now to do in my everyday life? Like tiny steps. Maybe usually I don't do this, but I'm gonna try to do this tiny thing right now, you know? And that has been something that has helped me last year to be, I guess it's some kind of self-compassion, to be not so hard on yourself and have those super big goals and like, oh, why haven't I done this yet or that yet? But just to learn how to be, maybe look at the past also and be like, okay, I've actually achieved some things that I can learn to be proud of.
Beautiful thought, and that's what also sort of connected the dots for me and made the difference clear between like self-esteem, which according to this scientist Christine Neff rather asks how am I different from others, and allows me to be like, yeah, I'm amazing, yo, like this kind of motivational thing, compared to self-compassion, which says how am I the same as others, you know. Acknowledging that sort of that kindness is not like amazing, like just talking to myself, but just knowing life is with me no matter what. And also actually it doesn't matter in what social situation I am, life itself, just life, because I'm alive, you know, is with me. And still there's all these challenges, yet I can realize I can be a good friend to myself. Life is with me, and pain is part of life, and I am with others. But like it doesn't differentiate me so much, you know. That again, this comparison thing is not there. Yeah, that's what I found quite powerful.
But I also think, because I'm always thinking when people scroll through Instagram and they see those mindful posts like, you have to get rid of all the toxic people in your life and so on. I'm like, it also depends on who is reading this. Maybe you're the toxic person yourself.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's so
so-
true.
Yeah.
What are you suggesting?
And
I would like to. Sorry,
no,
Sarah, sorry.
it's all you go.
No, I just thought about the question, what motivates you further, and I think actually it's not true. I think what motivates me is hearing music from other people and being like, oh, this is amazing. You know, like that. I think that kind of keeps me alive. I like there's always these moments when you kind of fed up with everything that you've heard, and then all of a sudden there's a musician that just like expresses something that you haven't heard before, and then I think that gives me life, for sure.
I agree.
I agree as well. Yeah.
Like just
See, you
being amazed
mentioned
about
something.
parts. Yeah, sorry.
You mentioned something about feeling together instead of sort of like comparing. And I feel like that's something that I can relate to because at the earlier part of my journey of music and creating, there's always this sort of pressure from so many people that they say you're average or you're normal or you'll never make it in the music world, or they sort of just doubt you. All of these like sort of like criticisms. And then so there were times where I'd always feel sort of like pushed out or rejected from a certain scene or certain group or a certain like, area of music. And then lately I've been start ever since I started this like whole Club Matryoshka thing or community building, I tend to find other people that feel the same way. And I feel like connecting with other people that understand what we do or feel the same way, it doesn't even have to be music, just other human beings that sort of can relate. You start to feel less alone and you start to feel sort of more connected with people. And that's something that sort of has helped me like throughout my whole journey from the start to till now. It's always been about community and sharing and bringing people together. And that's sort of what it connects to what you said for me. Yeah.
I guess as music makers, we do we are quite loners sometimes.
Mhm.
Like making music is not always doesn't always have the collaborative ideas behind it. And I guess the pandemic even made it much harder. But
Mhm.
can you, like, all of you, maybe like come up with some ideas how you were still able to connect with others, even maybe collaborate on projects, and like how you overcame maybe the hurdles of being isolated? Whoever wants to go.
Okay. Is it
I
specific
guess
to the pandemic time?
I also feel like we're still isolated.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah, we
like
are. I know it's not
I know
over.
if you can say like we've overcome it, but
No, I mean, overcoming not being able to collaborate. Loneliness might still be there, but somehow you connect, maybe just online, how we are having a conversation right now,
Mm.
even though we're not in the same place.
Yeah.
yeah,
Any
I mean the
success
club
stories?
I feel like Club Matryoshka is a huge success story. I came home on Saturday from shooting this video and it was so much work. I don't think I've ever worked this much in my life before. And I came home and I think it was like 10 minutes after Club Med started, and I was sitting here in my living room watching the Twitch stream and chatting with everybody, and we both started dancing in our living room, and it was such a, I don't know, it was a very like freeing feeling. And it's true what Jorge said, it's like it's, just like having this community vibe of seeing that other people are watching the same thing with you at the same time, and you all enjoying it, and just like commenting on being like, wow, like listening to music together. Like, for example, Mary Ann Hobbs' set, you know, we were all like, what is happening? And, this feeling of sharing an experience that is very specific to, I guess, our community of musicians, that definitely keeps us alive. So thank you, Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed collaborating with CTM on this project, and I think it sort of can answer your question about what kept us sort of what sort of like made us still continue working with each other despite the barriers, the distance, and all of the stuff. I think it was like a lot of technology now. Like I think for this specific project, James, we utilized a lot of Discord. And it's funny how Discord started out as a gaming platform, but I've been using it since the beginning of Club Matryoshka to coordinate stuff. It kind of feels like you're piloting a spaceship. You go into this voice chat for this thing, you go into that voice chat for another thing. And when we have meetings with James and the other CTM folks, you just hop into a voice call, and it's been a lot of it's been very convenient for us. But even the sort of like the beginning of Club Matryoshka, I feel like technology, like or a gaming platform bringing people together, the whole idea of Club Matryoshka is something that has been ingrained to me since I was younger, that you can't create this sort of reality. Like this sort of music cannot exist in a venue together. But it's so amazing for me. Was a dream come true to see everyone come together for that same purpose of music. and the same types of people that like this like similar music. So for me, that was a dream project, and I'm still on a high from it actually. So yeah, I think that sort of helped us sort of bring everyone together and come together as well, all of us. I think you're mute. See, I can't hear.
Mhm.
Oh, is it now
Oh,
working?
there. Now it's working.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Sarah, do you have any moments where you felt like, yes, I can be motivated? This is what still makes it all
I
happen?
mean, um, I went through all kinds of feelings, or I still am, and it's still not easy, I think. But with I started this project or slash network platform called Transmission with my friend Kerstin, who is a researcher, and Transmission focuses on making the political relevance of club and rave culture or history more visible and audible. And we started a podcast. But before the pandemic, we actually wanted to have like an offline meeting. But anyway, we started a podcast, and through this podcast, we got to meet so many people, also online from all over the world, who sent us the sweetest messages that this was resonating with them. And I kind of like this because it wasn't like an online club thing, but like more a conversation based
Hmm.
format. So
Mhm.
I was excited about, or I'm still excited about the opportunity to have these conversations and exchanges with people that are so needed. And I feel like now is a great time to really start the work. And then once clubs can open again, that we can put a lot of things into action finally. So these are the things that have kept me feeling motivated, and also just realizing that there are so many people who have very similar needs and wishes and thoughts, and there's so many creative people out there. And yeah, just like really the sign of like we need to speak with each other instead of about each other all the time.
Mm.
Nice. That's so true. To add to that, see, I feel like this whole pandemic period sort of like amplified our connectivity. It's like in a way we're distanced from each other, but it sort of doubled up on how people connect more because of the internet, because of all of these networks and like um groups and discords and message boards and stuff. I feel like there's so much that happened. Like it felt almost felt like we were in hyperspeed. Well, at least for me, because in Manila, there's a lot of things that sort of from where I'm from, there's a lot of things that I do that are sort of like not the norm, or sort of how people say it's never gonna work. But the gift, I guess, of the internet sort of connected me with everyone that could understand what I'm doing. Same with Sarah. She said like um so many people connected with her idea, and it's growing. The ideas are growing more, and soon when we can sort of get out of this pandemic, people can actually meet up and further fortify all of these ideas and put them into action again. So it's interesting how this period sort of also gave birth to new connections, stronger connections, and stronger ideas. I love it. Yeah.
But do you,
Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead,
go ahead.
I was just
Sarah.
thinking, do you guys feel like this was only something for younger people who are actually using the online world a lot? Because I'm thinking about older people who maybe not even
Hmm.
have social media, like, or maybe it's different in your experience, or maybe you have friends who are older who are taking part.
Actually, actually, to answer your question, like I live with a bunch of old people, like my relatives, and the effect of the pandemic on them is not as they don't see this side. A lot of them are sort of like um so I have my grandmother that lives with us, and she's always talking about how if this is life, I'd just rather die. And then I'd have to always have difficult conversations with my elder folks here about how how they should shift their perspective, but sometimes they just don't see it the same way. The information for them is a little bit overwhelming, and it's sad sometimes when I talk to them about these things. So but I do see your point. It's like for us, we may look at it like this sort of time to sort of like do all these things, but for them they feel like the world is crumbling. All they see is like bad news, and the idea that they can't go out. So that's a sort of like a reality also here. Like maybe to us, we see these things, but other people don't, depending on what they're used to or what they have access to or what they understand as well.
Yeah, that's so true. We're also in the lucky position that we all, I think, were pretty busy during the pandemic, and
Mm-hmm.
all of us had like projects to work on. And but like I guess there's lots of other people for who it was like completely different, or like like who lost their jobs, etc., and who haven't been able to work, etc., etc. So there's definitely lots of sides I think that we can't really cover
Mm-hmm.
from our experiences.
I want to come back to a very early thing we all kind of talked about. Sort of, we talked about sort of even like toxic positivity, or
Mm-hmm.
like the usual Instagram quotes, and
Yeah.
how you just have to, I don't know, create like a visual mind map, and then everything will just happen. And of course, I also didn't believe in that. But James, earlier you said what motivates you is the passion, and I realized. How I can now like support my family with 2 kids and a wife. And I am like busy, more busy than ever before, as you also just said, James. Um, and I believe what I actually did here was also sort of running a single-minded effort, a single-minded visualization due to passion for the last 20 years, without knowing it, because it came with sort of the aspects of I just wanted to be creative and I wanted to be part of it. But I always kind of like avoided sort of following a hype or whatever. I just feel like I just did it my way. And turns out that that was that part, I feel, what some people call the visualization, and sort of then it happens, so to say. I don't know. Wonder what you all think about that. That actually, there might be some truth to it. How when you visualize what you want to achieve, it might actually happen without the magic in it. Nothing magic about it.
Can I share? See, I feel like a lot of the things
Please.
that I've managed to do, outside of the whole woo idea of it, has some sort of visualization aspect to it. Like you sort of think about the things you want to attract in your life, not sort of in the whole. You just think about it and it comes to you. It's like you still have to create these pathways. So for me, it's like a lot of the things that I'm doing are things people told me not to do. Don't pursue music. Don't pursue art. Become a businessman or a doctor. Um, but everything just sort of lined up with passion. Like I think it goes back to that sort of like I'm doing a lot of the things that excite me, that make me feel like life is worth living, and everything starts to sort of align with that. It doesn't even have to be a magical concept. I feel like it just doesn't feel like work sometimes. So I feel like the more I just follow the passion, like it sort of feels like a internal compass for me. I'm not sure if it feels the same way for a lot of you, but that's how it has felt for me. And what C was saying, he doesn't really think about so much about the hype and stuff. He just does it his way. I felt like that's what I've been doing as well. And there are times where I felt like in the past where I'm not doing it my way, and I feel like I'm getting lost. But when you start to do it on your terms and like sort of follow just your internal sort of compass, that's sort of when I feel like everything aligns.
Yeah, I love what you just said, like regarding on your terms.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's such a crucial thing, especially for artists to learn to know what your terms actually are and how they change from time to time, and to keep checking in with yourself. Because I feel like if you, and I do DJ workshops sometimes, and often I ask the people who take part in the DJ workshops, what kind of dance floor do you want to create? Or what is it what you love about club DJ culture so much? And they come up with really lovely answers, and usually they're very similar to each other. People feel seen and loved and understood on the dance floor somehow. And then there's this beautiful aspect of music that it's like a universal language. And if you keep asking yourself as a DJ, for example, what kind of dance floor do you want to create, with what kind of feeling do you want people to go home with, you kind of like, I believe you can find your authenticity in there and know where you're coming from and why you're doing that. Because I think if you don't do that for a long time, maybe you wake up one day and you're like, I don't actually know anymore. Why am I here? And what is the purpose of this, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost.
So true.
I think that I was like, sorry.
No, please go. I'm so happy.
Just going back to the question that you asked. I think I was in a very privileged position this year because I also have a day job, and that kind of, you know, like kept me safe, so I could you also like pursue this passion. And for the very first time, I guess the pandemic actually brought me into a lucky situation where I could take a step back and be like, where do I actually want to go? Which is not a situation that a lot of people were in or are in. So I could take a breath and, you know, like focus and be like, and I don't think that actually, you know, just like visualizing where you want to go actually like does have to, you know, like help to make you get there. But it can also be something really just totally internal. It doesn't have to be like I want to sell millions of records, but be like, this is actually a way, this is a pathway in my music composition that I just found, and I feel really happy with it, and I want to follow that just for myself. And I think that's something that like actually this pandemic got me in the lucky position to do a bit more.
Can I share something related to what Sarah said? Sarah
Please.
mentioned about like when she used to do like her workshops and ask them what kind of dance floor they want to envision. It just reminded me of when I do my teachings in the university. Um, I always ask my students, what do they want to say with their music? And this is something that's surprising. Not a lot of them know what they're trying to say with their music, and they sometimes don't know they should be doing with their music, because sometimes their answers would be, oh, I just want to be like a YouTube star, or I want to be like this person. But it's like I always ask them like, but what do you want to say? Like, what's the message? And a lot of them, I realize, don't really self-reflect or think about this stuff. So I think it's very important. Like it's. I mean, I bet we've all been there, to the point where we don't know what to say with our music. We just want to make music. But I think it's very crucial to what we all do, like knowing what we're doing, knowing what kind of message you want to put your music with your music, what kind of vision you're trying to create. So yeah, this is something that I sort of like remembered when Sarah shared her
True.
workshops. Yeah.
100.
We only have a few minutes left, and we want to open the floor, the invisible floor, to some questions. There's one question which came in, and I'm just going to read it out, and whoever feels like taking it, please take it. What do you think about the pressure to justify creativity?
That's a big question.
It is.
I feel like Jorge kind of talked about that a bit earlier. You know, like having your I don't know, your peer group, or like people around you, maybe your relatives, your family, being like, why are you following down this path? And why are you not becoming a business person? Which, I mean, like, you're also a university teacher, so you have a pretty nice job. Maybe you want to talk about that a bit. I think that
Sure. The pressure to justify creativity. It's weird because I come from in Manila. Not everyone is sort of like. There's not a sort of perspective where artists are like a thing, a good thing. It's like if you, let's say, when I was in high school or in college, when you're being introduced to the family of someone you're dating and they find out you're an artist, they'll be like, "Oh no," or like, what are you gonna feed them? Paintings? I don't know. It's like, so it's kind of hard to sort of like explain to people or justify it here, where sort of like they expect everyone to sort of just do the normal stuff, like get a 9 to 5 job, be a banker, or get into stocks or something. Um, I guess. Wait, what's the question again? I got distracted.
It's a really tough question.
How
What
do
do you
you
think about
justify
pressure to justify
the
creativity?
the pressure? I used to feel like I had to always explain myself, but lately I felt like this is sort of maybe like an overrated answer, not caring. But I started to not care, like started to feel neutral about it when people always have to ask. Because whenever I go to social gatherings, it's like people always sort of look at me like I'm a weird person, where I'm just because I'm really into like art and making stuff. And I just stopped having to even like explain myself and just like, be. Sometimes I used to feel like I had to always explain everything and defend every decision that I do musically, or even with the gear I buy. It's like someone would criticize you for not owning a piece of gear. But nowadays, I'm just sort of like I'm just at peace with who I am. And I feel like sometimes you don't have to explain everything. You just have to do it. It's like you don't owe anyone an explanation sometimes. Yeah. Sarah wants to
Um,
say something. Yeah.
yeah, I instantly thought about, the term creativity and classism, because I feel like you only have to justify your creativity if it's something that is not accepted by society.
Mm-mm.
I feel like in Berlin, for example, when everything with COVID started, there was like politics put a lot of effort into saving like cultural institutions that support classical music, for example. But club culture itself has to justify itself all the time why clubs are important. People kind of think, oh, it's just young kids getting fucked up and listening to loud, terrible music. And that's something that I just, realized during the pandemic, or when the pandemic started. And I experienced something with my parents where they're like, oh my God, you want to DJ in clubs? Like, are you going to take drugs now? And all these kind of things. And I don't even drink alcohol, but like now they finally believe me. But and I'm not shaming anyone who does whatever they want. That's totally fine. But this was the kind of picture my parents had, and they were afraid that something bad was going to happen. And to be honest, just recently, they finally understand that this really means the world to me, that this is my passion. And I had like the privilege and the support of wonderful people who were helping me to make a living out of this. And, things that maybe would mean a lot to me, like, I don't know, playing at a certain festival, they would not understand. They're like, well, okay, you just played a show. But when they maybe would see an interview from a certain magazine they would even know, then suddenly a switch would turn on, like, oh, actually, okay, now we can kind of take you serious now, In their world, it has to make sense. There has to be some kind of intersection until
That makes
they
sense.
realize. Because when I tell them, hey, I played Boiler Room for the first time, they're like, and so what? you know, but you know what I mean? So I find it kind of interesting how there's like different forms of understanding
Mm.
things, and it depends on the context when you have to justify your creativity. But yeah, I guess that's something we have to practice. So when I try to explain to someone who doesn't know anything about club culture, I'm just like, this is a space where we can practice some kind of utopia, where we can practice the world that we wish for, when it's like some kind of safer space, for example. And then it brings people together, and there's probably no place in the world, no tribe that hasn't created music or dance. And that's something that connects us all. And therefore we should respect creativity in all its forms.
I love that.
I would like to just circle around the the word pressure again. Sarah, you were like a really successful DJ in my eyes already before you released a song, even though also DJs don't have to release music. But was there a lot of pressure on you to sort of what will she release after like sort of years of um, traveling the clubs? You really wanted to to play in, and connecting to creative people you really wanted to get to know?
There's always pressure, I guess, well, especially from within myself and not so much from the outside, because often if we envision the worst case, it will never happen. But what I always try to like do within my DJ sets was to create a journey. I call my music rainbow bass, and so I can't be put into a box. Let's say, for example, I would have been a techno DJ, and then through my journey, I find out about jungle music, and I'm like, okay, my first release is going to be jungle music, and then you might be afraid that your fan base won't understand you, and I can understand that there's a certain pressure that maybe builds up. But I feel like I don't know, what's the word, Vorteil in English?
Advantage.
Advantage, yeah, thank you. Was that my sets were always kind of hard to put in a box. So that for me kind of gave me the freedom to be less scared maybe if I would have just focused on one music genre. Because I always want to show people that all kind of genres are connected to each other. And I feel like with the younger generation, who has mostly access to YouTube and all kinds of things, they're a little bit more open, This might be a bit random, but I went to a K-pop concert once and it was amazing. And I didn't know what to expect or anything. And it was like a 3-hour concert, and each song of the band was a complete different genre. And these are all very young people who are listening to the music. And I was like, wow, interesting. Maybe they would even understand a DJ set of mine. Do you know what I mean? So I believe that there is a shift towards seeing or feeling more in spectrums when it comes to music and not putting people in a box. And you can see that within a pop culture as well, that, I don't know, there's like artists like Rosalia, for example, and it's very interesting what they do. And it's very successful. So this kind of like, if I remind myself of artists like her, for example, not that I want to be like her with anything, but I feel like people are becoming more open and moving away from trying to put creativity into a box.
Yeah, I also really feel that sort of it's the time for back in the days, but it used to be called eclectic music, right? Like sort of eclectic music taste. And maybe that's also due to the fact that now people are not so much releasing albums anymore, but releasing song by song. And we have like a playlist culture. And but it definitely makes me happy to be able to now hear more stories in DJ sets. And yeah, so I can definitely, it resonates with me how you play and what stories you tell.
But I would love to translate that into club culture as well. But I don't know how it is in where you went clubbing, similar objects, like I feel like in Berlin we have like a genre club space segregation happenings. Like this is techno music, and in room 2 you have like the eclectic weird music.
Oh,
and
I think it's been following in Manila. It's like I think a lot of the club spaces in Manila are starting to think that way as well. Like there'll be like a space to experiment in, and there'll be a space that's accessible so they can make money. So they do that. But in there has been like a sort of influx of venues before COVID hit, where it's like this venue is known for playing this type of music, but suddenly this when she visited, there was sort of like a sort of, what do you call it, saturation of the sound. Everything was starting to sound the same, like in a certain area. So yeah, that sort of culture still happens as well. I think they got it actually from traveling. Some of these owners like traveling, and they see these things happen in different countries, and they try to bring it back.
And is there any counter culture happening?
There's definitely like venues that do all. I think the beauty of certain venues is they're able to sort of um sustain themselves with the sort of more accessible types of music and still throw the cool underground parties. Those are the venues that I love, because they know sort of how to balance it. And the owners deep down inside, they're really underground. So yeah, those spaces sort of give me hope. And actually, a lot of those spaces have molded me and shaped me towards my projects now as well.
Cool.
Two more questions came in from the YouTube stream.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna just go for the first one. What role does empathy play in your practice? Whoever wants to take it first.
I actually wanted to call my next album Empathy.
Okay, you take the answer then.
I wonder though how to put it into a concise phrase, what role it plays. I feel like I'm hyper conscious of my surroundings. So what some people would call a vibe, when you sit next to a person and you can kind of like feel what they feel, or they say something and they don't really express it in their words, but you can feel they're angry or they're sad or there's something more to it. It feels like, I don't know if it's a sixth sense or something that maybe is sometimes a bit underrated or has been a bit underrated in the way that we communicate with each other. But it's such an important, or almost, I want to call it a skill, to be able to, read the subtext in a conversation through empathy. So I feel like empathy is basically, it's everything. It's the way that you connect with other people, the way that you go into a conversation, the way that you even when you meet a stranger and exchange small talk, and then you kind of connected to them in that way, that there's this awkward moment when you don't know if you should stop the conversation or whether you should go on with it, and this is all some kind of psychological thing that is happening in the background. So it's empathy is everything.
I agree. I think it's very important in what we do. It's like, for me, someone who sort of has always been working with the community. It's like trying to sort of understand the people, understand the community, understand the needs of people, and just basically trying to relate and sympathize and sort of like understand what they need. Um, I think empathy is sort of like something that we also exhibit or tap into when we DJ. It's like sort of knowing what to play, knowing what the crowd is feeling. I always, when I watch an amazing DJ, I always feel like they're reading my minds. It's like they know exactly what to play at what moment. And I feel like this is something that extends to all of our work, not just in DJing, maybe when we're performing with an instrument or when we're singing. And I think it's very crucial to everything we do, not just in creativity, but as a human being, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And as you said, James, empathy is everything. And I think it's also important that each of us understands that we all have areas to work on where we don't have enough empathy yet. That
True.
the last year has shown us that with Black Lives Matter and all of the discussions that has been started, that people are lacking empathy as well.
Mm-mm.
And that sometimes people think they feel empathy, but then it's more like guilt that they haven't done something. So empathy can be quite complex, I believe. And but that's probably what we need to create a better world, the ability to think, feel, and act in a more intersectional, feminist way, to create a world where all of us can live more safe, basically, no matter their skin color, religion, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
I would even argue that empathy is exactly what I was talking about in the beginning, basically compassion, whether it's self-compassion or just compassion for human beings around us, and any being, whether it's human or a plant or an animal. So yes, all for empathy. I'm gonna put out this next question here. think it's quite a nice question. Talking about creating safe club spaces, how could we bring that concept to digital culture spaces? Maybe Hoher should go first since you're running a digital
Yeah.
club.
I think it's important to sort of remember that behind every avatar or in the digital space lies a person. And this is something that I sort of developed with Club Matryoshka. Like we wanted it to be a safe space, and we wanted it to address a lot of the things that we couldn't experience or the issues we had with Manila's club scene in general. So, but it's different. The rules are different. The problems are different also. So the way people sort of break the safe spaces, you have to think about that. How do sort of people breach a safe space in a digital context? You have hackers, you have people that sort of are griefing, you have people that sort of like catfish, you have all of these sort of things. So for me it's about accountability. Like in Club Matryoshka, we use sort of like we call it a rave list now. Um and we sort of have people sign up and register. And though I only learned this recently from our last collaboration with CTM that in other countries people take their data seriously. But in Manila, when we were doing it, we would just get their data. So it's like that someone is an avatar in the game, but if they cause trouble, you can always talk to them in real life or message them. They can't hide because we've had instances in the early iterations where there's harassment cases. There are people being creeps to other people. Um, so these problems also extend to the digital world. So sort of having like security, we also have sort of lack of a better term, digital bouncers that sort of like check what's happening in games, the ability to check the console, so you can see if people are saying things, but also setting rules and making sure that there's sort of layers to it before they get in. They're already sort of accepting the certain rules. So in enforcing those. So for us, initially we had so many layers, which became a sort of barrier of entry. But it's very important to sort of like make sure that everyone that's in the game or in the digital space, you know who they are, or there's a way to sort of like call them out if they do something in the space, because there are some spaces that if they do something bad they can just disappear, delete, or make it come back with a new account and do the same thing. So there's like ways to track IP addresses and stuff. Those things also work, or be strict about banning policies and
What's
sort
the
of
worst
learn
thing
to,
that ever happened in your digital club?
um we had a griefer burn swan meat, kill swan meat while she was playing a set, and someone like this blowing up a stage during a show. It still feels disrespectful even though it's inside the game. What else? We've had people sort of like approach female club goers and sort of try to like um come onto them sexually without like just in a rude way. So we've had sort of those situations, and they tell us, or people trying to sell drugs to the younger club goers inside the digital space. Like they'll type a whisper and be like, oh, where do you live? That's sort of where we draw the line. So we're very strict about those things. You report it to us, automatic ban. We just really want to sort of like not have those types of people there or violating the rules or sort of like harassing the youngins. So for us, it's very strict. It's like there's no second chances. Like if you do something from that on that degree, it's like you're out. Your IP address is blocked unless I mean they can come back with a VPN, of course. But if they do something again, yeah.
Because you mentioned data privacy, I just wanted to mention that today is Data Privacy Day.
Oh wow,
You probably didn't know.
I didn't know that. Thank you. I learned something new today. Yeah, I think sometimes it's harder to sort of like keep a digital space safe because of how there's so many ways for people to breach it as well. But you just have to sort of like develop and learn from the past. Ever since you got hacked, and the worst thing actually that happened is someone crashed our server during an event, and we had to sort of build a new world on the spot. That sort of really broke our hearts. But after that, we sort of tightened up the security. Never had to deal with something like that ever since. And I feel like it pays off to sort of learn from your mistakes and figure out how to make things better.
I think it's also that we're still learning, because digital events are something that is so new. I guess, Club Med is a bit of a veteran, but like it's still a new space for us, and we still have to kind of establish the rules. And like seeing these 2 Club Meds that we did together also like gave our team a whole new perspective about digital awareness, and like thinking about buddy systems where you kind of go through a space and look for people that seem lost or something, and like just connect with them and be like, hey, are you okay? Which is something that is directly translated from awareness teams in like physical venues. And I think these are things that we're still working on to figure out, and how can we create safer digital spaces. What can we actually translate from real world events, and what are things that we have to learn completely new, because they can only happen in the digital.
Has anyone of you used Clubhouse before? Or what's it called? I don't even know.
It's called Clubhouse, yeah.
Yeah.
What is Clubhouse? Like,
apparently it's a new app that everyone loves and everyone uses, but it's very exclusive because you need to have an iPhone, I believe, and only people who are already in there can invite you, and that's how you get to be part of it or something. I don't use it, but I was just wondering if you have any experience.
Yeah, it's only voice, like there's no video, but there's also virtual rooms and people have conversations. Yet in Germany, it sort of breaks data rules because you have to share your address book with the company, and they can send advertising to all the people in your address book. I wanted to just say how I believe Club Matryoshka is such a beautiful and safe space. I even sent my 9-year-old son to this club.
Hansi was at
is
CTM,
very known in the Club Matryoshka world. And what I find beautiful is that we, as avatars there, we don't have an age, we don't have gender, we don't have a color really. Like
I love that too about it. Yeah,
we can put a skin on, so to say. You can download whatever you want, and that's what you are. We're all kind of the same height, not very tall, in the real world. And suddenly, it's a beautiful experience. And thanks for putting that on.
Thank you,
CTM and Club Matryoshka.
I believe. Can I add something?
Sure.
Speaking of, I prefer the term safer spaces actually, because I don't think there is a safe space that works for everyone. And when we speak about safe spaces, I try to learn that we also always should speak about accessibility. And we spoke about before we went live, right? That since COVID, there's so much happening online, like this right now, but then people are hard of hearing or maybe excluded and those kind of things. And that's something that we really need to work on. Like that's in our responsibility, because I don't want it to, that it's up to people who are in need of those tools, that they have to ask if it's accessible. It should be just right in the Facebook event or whatever, if it's accessible, or if there is a transcript following. So maybe we can use this little moment to let people know that transcripts will be made. So and that's just forgotten really so often.
I totally forgot to even mention it at the very beginning, and so thankful you still do. So there will be a transcript, and we will get it ready and upload it together with CTM after the event, not immediately after, but as fast as possible, because so many beautiful points were made. And it's also recorded, and it's going to be on YouTube later, our conversation. And it's a beautiful reminder how we always just tend to think in our bubbles.
True.
And we should increase those bubbles to the max.
Yeah, and we can be part of that solution, you know, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe everyone who's listening, if you're part of an online festival the next time and you want to help maybe create a safer space, you can reach out to the organizers and ask them, or maybe point out like, hey, it would be great if you add that to your homepage, and like what the status is in terms of accessibility. And that's also a form of activism that can be fun, you know, can be joyful. I'm not saying that people should write angry emails to festival promoters, but just, you know, be kind, be curious. Maybe they're working on something and it hasn't been added to the website yet, but those are kind of things where we can be active ourselves to help create better spaces.
Might I add, if there's anyone watching, like, it's also part of like Club Matryoshka's advocacy to be welcome to different neurodiversity types. So people that have learning disabilities, people that have autism, we welcome all types of people in the club, and you're welcome to join us and enjoy. We're there for you. So if anyone's watching, it's a safer space, and you guys are welcome. Any more questions?
There is no questions right now coming from YouTube. We'll be a little bit longer on the Discord chat,
Sure.
CTM's Discord chat, after our conversation. And we are slowly coming to an end. I would like to, I just have a few more little ideas in my mind. One is, I always like to ask, so creative people, what happens if there is no creativity? Nothing happens, you know, you're like, maybe you're even working, maybe there's even a deadline or whatever to finish something. What do you do? I mean, it's not, it's nothing magic to be creative. It takes effort, and it doesn't always happen. So, but what do you do if nothing happens, and how do you spend your time, or what's your advice here? Again, whoever wants to take it.
I think not every day is a day to be creative, and sometimes you have to call it a day. And I think that everybody knows these moments, even if it's the same when you're studying for a test or something, where you're just sitting in front of a screen, or you're trying to like quench something out of yourself, and it's just not coming. And I think it's like one of the most important things to remember that there's always, you can always, you know, like try to take time and be like, yeah, but maybe tomorrow is a creative day, and today is a day that I use on other things like editing or something. And then I think you can divide your process, if you're a music maker, into different steps. You can be like, you can, for example, work on the arrangement, or you can, you know, like maybe work on the sound of the bass drum, or if you don't have a bass drum, you can, you know, like listen to music from other people and like get inspired and see like how did they approach this problem, or like, I don't know, something like that, you know, like just try to not force yourself and be like, I have to do this right now, because I think forcing yourself is sometimes just like gets you into a loop where you just like
That's
even
true.
feel more inhibited, and then I just like you know, like maybe I'm one of the people who's like, I probably have 100 sketches of tracks that I never finish on my computer right now. And you sometimes, I think I also talked with this with Sarah a lot about this. Sometimes, you know, it's very it helps to let go.
That's so true.
Take a step back.
Yeah, less is more.
Yeah.
For me, see, it's like it took me a while to realize that rest is also rest is very powerful. I used to sort of like beat myself up about having to make something, having to like write music every day. I think it came from when I was in college. I went to music school, and everyone around me is like churning things out every day. You'd meet someone who can write 10 beats in like what a sitting, and it made me feel like should I be like that? And it just came to the point where you knowing when you or not to rest is very important. It's like one day I realized you sit in front of your thing and you just keep hammering away at this thing, and then you realize you're just getting more frustrated because nothing's coming out. Realizing when you're forcing it is a skill. Realizing when to step back away from it is super powerful, and knowing when to rest. Sometimes when I'm not creative, there's certain times I'm just staring at the ceiling, and that sort of is so comforting for me, not having to think about anything or read a book, watch a funny movie. Or there were times in the past where I'd take a bus to nowhere. Um, just break the habit sometimes, break the sort of routinal feeling of just like sitting in front of your computer forcing to write. Sometimes we forget we're human beings, and we just need to sort of experience life. It's not about just sort of just like constantly like creating, constantly like forcing yourself. And I feel like I'm a lot kinder to myself in that regard. Like I know how to step back, I know how to rest, I know how to have fun. It's like music for a while wasn't fun anymore to me. I was like, why am I thinking so much about fixating so much about writing an album when I realize sometimes that there's nothing to write about. Go out, experience life, get inspired. So
Inspiration
yeah.
needs to come from somewhere.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I and that's so true what you said. It's like, like, I guess in that making music is a form of translation. In a way, you just like translate life into a different form of language. And if you don't experience life, then it's very hard to translate.
That's true.
Yeah, I love what you said about rest. That's so true. I guess there's no being that doesn't need rest. But as I mentioned in the beginning, we're living in a capitalist society, so rest is sometimes so
Yeah.
hard to get. It's often a privilege, and so you just have to take it, I guess. There's no other way. And I think it's also, speaking of rest, so important to make boundaries. So if there's a deadline, just let them know you can't do it right now. What will happen? What's the worst thing that's going to
True.
happen? Like, I never want to work with you. So be it. It's okay, And, James, when you said let it go, I guess that's also a form of letting something go. And that also connects to empathy, that we should have empathy for each other. We are not machines. And also with being an artist and always responding to emails. And,
Right.
and I have that issue myself. I always feel kind of like I have homework left to do if I have all these red notifications popping up everywhere. And I want to be reliable, but then I'm like, actually, I can respond tomorrow and it's still going to be fine,
Mm-hmm.
And we should practice that. And that's something that COVID kind of forced us to do. And in the beginning of COVID, people were like, I'm doing sports at home, I'm doing yoga, like this self-optimization thing that James also mentioned. And I want to move away from that. I know it's hard because we're still living in those systems that don't really allow us to do those things. But we kind of can practice that to some extent in our lives, I believe. There is no other way.
Very true.
Well said. What helped me also is like reducing, you mentioned like notifications popping up everywhere, Sarah. And what helped me a lot was reducing my inboxes, so to say. It's like, I'm not reachable here for any job matter, like this is also just a fun zone. Don't talk like, and I have to sort of transport this message in an empathetic way, but it really helped me a lot to like reach out to people and be like, could you write me an email, like yeah. And again, like in the beginning of sort of my meditation journey, I felt like it was very hard to sit there for, probably in the beginning, even 5 minutes was hard. Then it was 10 minutes, which felt very hard. Then it was 20 minutes. And now I can even sit there for 1 hour. And I do know that that's a privilege, but time also, it doesn't really matter like how much of this sort of resting moment you take. And it's quite amazing to see like, oh, I'm actually not always needed. It's fine to just take myself out of the picture and just sit here. And 10 minutes is nothing when you're on your phone looking at Instagram, but 10 minutes in silence and just not doing anything is just an amazing rest haven for me. Yeah. I think this brings us to the end of this beautiful conversation. And I want to say thank you once again for taking the invitation to talk to me about aspects of self-reflection. I hope people on the stream enjoyed it. And yeah, we'll stay a bit longer on the Discord chat, the CTM Discord chat. I'm sure it's going to be dropped into the YouTube channel where that is. I don't have to tell URLs and whatever. And see you all around.
See you.
Thank you very
See
much.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.